Maybe you'd like to start. I think more people are joining in. Henrik, you're muted.
We can wait another minute, Alston. I guess 22 people online. Alston, we can start, I guess. It's almost 3 minutes past 2.
Yes.
Himanshu?
Yes.
Would you like to kick off or yeah?
Yeah. Already you can kick off.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, welcome everyone to this online mini conference, I can call it, of the Circular Economy Research Network, Asia Pacific. Let me start by acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, skies, waters, and community. We pay our respects to their cultures and to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today. I'm sure we have a few more joining us, and we are very pleased and delighted to have our 2 speakers with us to talk about food and organics sector. Let me very quickly introduce our 2 speakers. We have plenty of time for Q&A later on. Please provide your questions in the using the Q&A function, and we'll come back to you later on with your questions and put those questions to our 2 invited speakers. The first speaker will be Sikander Siraj, who myself and a couple of my colleagues from Monash University here met earlier this year, based in the city of Udaipur in the state of Rajasthan in India, where he has started a very successful venture. He'll talk about that himself a little bit. Sikander is an engineer and a sustainability strategist and has now turned to farming. Sikander is a graduate of the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, now called Mumbai. After graduation, he took up an industry job for about 18 years. He traveled the world and worked for a number of different companies. And recently, he paused from his industry career to pursue his passion, which I guess is farming, because you do come from a farming family, I think, Sikander. So you've established an organization now called Uncompromised, where you've been working on a technology-led pathway to make climate resilient, organic, or regenerative farming as a norm rather than as an exception, if you like. And your approach is based on better utilization of resources, leaner operations, and combining the latest science and technology with conventional wisdom to improve farming economics and make this possible for all farmers of all sizes across the whole nation and globally, I guess. So, Sikander, thank you very much for joining us today. And we've asked you to speak for about 15 minutes. You've got a set of slides that you'll speak to, that you'll share with us, and we'll take your question. We'll put the questions to you in a little while. Our second speaker is going to be Allister Hill. He's based here in Melbourne at RMIT University. He is a colleague of Simon Lockery, who sent an apology yesterday to me, saying that he was very, very sick and had bad flu and so on. So, Allister, thank you very much for joining us at a very short notice. You work very closely in the role of Deputy Program Leader with the End Food Waste Cooperative Research Center as part of the REDUCE program that RMIT University is leading here. And you come to that position with a wide range of experiences as a journalist researcher and as a applied ethnographer and anthropologist. And you worked very, very closely with indigenous communities across Australia. And you have many years of experience of leading various projects, both academic projects and other sort of market research related type of projects and so on. You have expertise in digital health, software development. So that's very much important, I guess, as we develop our farming and food supply chains and so on. So your core expertise is in circular food and circular food supply chains, I guess, and also another area, which is the built environment. Allister, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure we'll have some questions for you as well later on. But we'll start with Sikander. If you wouldn't mind, Sikander, please share your slides, share your screen with us, and let's hear from you what you've been doing over the last few years, setting up Uncompromised. Over to you, Sikander.
Thank you, Amrik, and thank you everyone for being here and for the opportunity to speak to all of you. So I'm Sikander. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Uncompromised, and we're basically a company focused on figuring out how to build a sustainable climate resilient future. So when we started out, we asked ourselves a few questions. What does a climate resilient natural system of the future start to look like? And there were some very obvious answers that we got. Can we build a climate resilient future on monocropping? And the answer was no. Can we continue to use the amount of chemicals that we're using today in our food chain? And the answer was no. Can we continue to mess with nature and create our own industrial ways of growing food and still have a resilient future without native flora and fauna? And we realized that the answer is no. We need that ecosystem to thrive. And as climate is turning, we were asking ourselves, can we exist without designing for extreme weather events, which seem to be happening every day? In fact, just before the call started, we were discussing, and I was telling Amrik and Himanshu and Allister that a couple of days ago, for the first time in our 20 odd years, we had a small flooding in Udaipur. And it was a result of very high rainfall in a very short period of time, which is becoming the norm more and more now, right? So can we design any natural system of farm or anything like that to exist without designing for extreme weather events? And can they be, one-time fixes, or are they things that we will need to constantly nurture and develop? And the answer was that no one-time fix is going to work. We need to have a very sustained engagement. And the last piece of the puzzle was, can it be a solution without people? Can we build a solution where people really continue with their lives as it is, and things will just keep on working? And we realize that it's not going to happen. We need people kind of front and center as part of the overall solution. And the last question was in the context of sustainability beyond just environmental and social sustainability? Can we design things which can be ROI positive? So it's a win-win for everybody in the end. And our work over the past couple of years gave us the answer that it can be yes. So the conviction that we came out with, after 3 years of working on this and doing a lot of R&D and tech work, we realized that if we try to apply a solution in isolation, it will fail. Only a holistic approach can actually address this problem. And to build resilience all the way from upstream to downstream, if we talk about the food system, we really need to have healthy natural ecosystems, and they need to be supported by people. And if done right, the investment that happen will yield both nature and ROI positive outcomes for it. And that's the core premise and the core thesis on which we're building. So what we're doing is kind of simple. We have a 4D solution framework. We start by defining what is the problem on the ground, what are the local nuances and the context to solving that problem, bringing clarity and visualizing the outcomes that we want out of it. We design, so we do a lot of engineering on any farm or any watershed or any forest application that we're working on. Use a lot of GIS-based information and other things to figure out how can we design a blueprint which will create a climate resilient system and also restore some of the things that were lost over time. We have in-house capabilities and we have a lot of a very intense supplier network to take that plan to execution. And then our focus has been on building the technology and the knowledge to be able to drive this, to perpetuity. How do you manage once you developed a farm, for example, on regenerative principles and building it for climate resilience? How do you make sure that it continues to thrive and give you the outcomes that you want? And the way we've structured it is that we've divided our focus into 2 areas. One is called terrascapes, which is building the landscapes of resilience, be it farms, be it forests and other things, reforestation. And the other part is connected, where we are working with people to connect them back to nature. We're working on education, pre-primary to primary to secondary. We're holding competitions for high school students and college students around climate and around sustainability, all with the intent of connecting people back to nature and making them the stewards who will protect nature as we go forward. I'll just quickly talk about terrascapes, which has a lot of relevance to what we're talking about right now. It follows the same 4D framework, and we've built a couple of building blocks which we feel are the ones that together make that solution viable. And in some cases, only one of the blocks is used. In some cases, all of the blocks actually come together. So at our core is a lot of research. So we are doing a lot of agronomy, water and soil engineering research. We are working with conservationists to understand better how biodiversity can be restored through bringing more native flora and fauna back into the picture. And, working on the right kind of inputs from a farming context, for example, which allow ROI positive and nature positive outcomes to happen. So a lot of work going on the research side. And then we are building our own tools for monitoring and diagnostics. So the marketplace is full of companies doing IoT sensors and other kind of analytics. But when we started imagining how they fit into a multi-cropping, agroforestry combined cropping system, we realized that there was no solution we could just take, because all of the solutions existing in the market were closed loop. So we had to design our own solution, which we call TerraSense, where we have our own IoT sensor stacks, which integrate with power systems and other things. And we are taking into account satellite information and where relevant drone information, and designing apps for on-ground data collection. And that allows us to, build a health profile of a farm, for example, and really understand what's up and what needs to be worked on, and constantly monitor the progress and take into inputs like microclimate and other information that's available through all the data sources out there. And then any solution cannot be built on tech. So a lot of focus that we have goes into planning and supply chain. So the success of any agri venture is dependent on whether you're able to sell what you're growing. First, you have to grow, right? But you have to be able to sell it, without the produce perishing or getting spoiled, or not reaching the end user at the right price. So really figuring out commodity price indexes, market linkages to figure out what is the best thing to grow, how best to grow it, and then also sorting the last mile linkages for supply chain of inputs and both for outputs. And the challenge we have here is if you're going from a monocropping to a multi-cropping model, the farmers, particularly in the global south, where they are smallholder farmers, will just not have enough volume of a given produce to justify the logistics to the market. So how do you design supply chain which are able to actually accommodate that kind of a shift? And then we are building our asset management solution, which is TerraOS, which allows us very seamless way of visualizing these systems through a digital twin. So we create a digital twin of a farm or whatever other asset that we're working on, and it allows us to really map what's going on and monitor and then execute things that need to be. And over time, we are building the AI ML capabilities to have more predictive intervention. And finally, from a scalability point of view, a lot of our effort goes into standardizing things. And this comes from my oil and gas experience, where we are able to do the same kind of operation anywhere in the world, thanks to a very robust set of processes that ensure that anybody who is executing that operation is following the same set of instructions and actually delivering the same outcomes. So that's what it is. TerraSense, like I mentioned, is an IoT sensor stack. TerraOS is a digital integration, and TerraFood is the outcome of what we are doing on the ground. Not all of our own R&D in terms of product formulation, but really figuring out which inputs and in which combination at what time of delivery work best, and then getting it out in a very easy to use manner to everybody. For the context of what we are doing here, let me just touch into the organic food market in India. So the market size in 2023 was about 131 billion rupees, something like $1.5 billion there. And it's anticipated to grow at a CAGR of 37% over the next 4 or 5 years. So it's a significant growth opportunity. India actually hosts 30% of all the organic producers in the world. Not all of them are actually working towards domestic demand. Most of the organic production in India is actually geared towards export markets like USA, UK, Europe, and Australia. Today, we have about 2.3 million hectares under organic cultivation as per records. So pretty decent presence on the ground in terms of the number of farmers who are doing it, the amount of acreage that is allocated to it. But the domestic demand is still very nascent. The primary consumer group in India is urban middle class, people who are more aware and educated. And their shift is driven by more health and safety concerns because the regulations are not very strong. There's a very genuine fear that people have in terms of what is going into growing my food. And that is driving the shift towards organic. However, at the same time, with everything in India, price sensitivity is quite high. So that acts as a barrier to mass adoption. People want good stuff, but they are very reluctant to pay for it. And part of it is driven by the fact that the regulatory framework is not as robust as it should be yet. And it allows for organic products, which are not really organic, to be on the shelves. And there are stories all the time, both on the input side and on the produce side of stuff which is clearly not organic, but is being certified organic and coming to the shelves. And that drives the consumer behavior as well. That if I don't know if this thing is truly organic, should I even pay a premium for it? If I'm going to be in the dark, I might as well pay low prices and consume something which I know is wrong anyway. And go ahead with that. As a producer, so we are on the very upstream end of the supply chain, if we look at it that way. There's a couple of very key challenges that we face, and some of it is very Indian in context, but I think some of it is very global in its perspective. The top one being climate change. Climate change is dramatically altering outcomes for producers. One night's rain can completely ruin a 3-month to 6-month long crop, and it's very difficult to come back from it because growing season need you to plant at the right time and get things out at the right time. If you miss that window because of whatever, you may not actually be able to recover 3 to 6 months worth of production just by one event. So understanding climate change, its impact, not just the floods and other things, but also how small temperature variations are actually driving pests in a very different manner than before, shortening growing seasons in the winters, for example. The other context is that the supply chains, specifically in the Indian context, are very fragile, both on the input side and on the output side. And when you're talking organic foods, food which are intrinsically of higher value, it is very important to have a very good traceability and to ensure that the good product or the organic product is not getting mixed with a non-organic product in the supply chain part of the equation. And that is something that is not really very robust in India, at least right now. And I think that's true for quite a bit of the global south at this point of time. And unless we're able to solve that traceability element and make them more robust, even if a farmer wants to switch to organic farming today in India, the access to inputs is not easy because the entire ecosystem is built around conventional farming. So while there are village level distributions for fertilizers, for pesticides of the conventional kind, access to organic inputs is not that easy. So solving that is quite important. Organic farming is an art which is lost. While in the West, there's been a lot of industrial organic farming, which is very similar in its look and feel to monocropping, like we see happening otherwise. In the Indian context, because of the small holding, organic and monocropping will not work. So the older version, which is organic farming with multi-cropping, with trees and everything involved, is something that is needed, but that is wisdom that has been lost. And so getting the knowledge bit sorted and creating the solutions which allow people to access that knowledge and build robust growing methodologies is important. Like I mentioned earlier, market linkages are limited. A grower in rural India does not have any ready or set market linkage available. So organic farming can truly only propagate in clusters where a collective of farmers come together, have significant acreage, have significant amount of produce, and they're able to actually find a buyer for it there. And given the challenge with organic farming growing, the initial capital that is needed to be able to drive that behavior is also not easily accessible today. And finally, the complexity of getting certified, the compliance burden, and the associated costs is another thing that makes it difficult. I'll stop here. I have a couple of questions which I'll leave open-ended, and maybe we can talk about it during this call. What are the technology enablers that will help build a sustainable and resilient food system? What are the gaps today? We are trying to solve some of them, but it's something that we're constantly out trying to find there. The second question I have is, what does the climate resilient supply chain for food look like? Starting from the very upstream side of it, if you are going to do more multi-cropping, how does the supply chain adapt to something like that? Is the current organic model the right one? When we know that current farming practices need to change quickly, having this massive compliance burden and intrinsic costs which make the cost of the produce higher, is that really the right model which will drive more sustainable growing practices and better food down? And the final question is, what kind of access to capital framework will accelerate this transition faster? What will make it such that farmers across India, across the global south, are willing to adopt, take that risk which is in their mind and move forward and ensure long-term food security. So thank you very much for your time and for the opportunity to present. I'll take a pause here and hand it back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Sikander, I just have one quick question, and I'm sure there'll be other questions coming from our participants. Please put your question into using the Q&A function at the top there. So you know, I guess what you're explaining and what we saw when we visited a couple of your farms and your head office as well in Udaipur is that you know farms, particularly in your case, becoming much more technology dependent. You talked about all the different technologies that you're now utilizing, and you refer to sort of, you know, knowledge gaps and technology gaps and so on. To do all of these things, you know, to establish an organic farm and then make that whole supply chain work, you know, effectively, you need people with competencies. And you refer to competency development, and you refer to capability for execution. And if you think about the whole supply chain end to end, can you talk a little bit about, you know, the difficulties that you've had to overcome in you know, having the competencies necessary at all levels, if you like, and across the whole supply chain? You know, I hear you that you come from a, you know, excellent background, you know, engineer, top institution, worked for multinational companies, and you understand this area, you know, very well. But when you think about all the other people involved in your supply chain end to end, they, you know, they don't have those competencies, and developing those competencies, I'm sure, is a challenge. How did you overcome those challenges?
That's a very good question, Amrik, and I think it's at the heart of the scalability puzzle in this solutioning, right? The competency starts from right from the field workers on the ground. You know, a lot of the field workforce today has grown up growing only one or two kinds of crops. So when you start introducing more crop varieties, they really don't have the idea of how to grow them. Or they have followed a very set kind of techniques year on year, and they're very good at that. But when you start introducing new techniques, they're at a loss. And obviously, most of this workforce that we're talking about is not very high literacy and not very tech savvy and whatnot, right? So the challenge for us has been how do you simplify this thing? How do you simplify something that is new for them in a manner that they can understand? And we've been, I don't think I can say that we have the solutions. The way we've been approaching it is building a lot of video content, building a lot of photo-based work instructions. So almost every task that we do today, we have standard work instructions, which is something I picked up from Schlumberger, which is a very simple, you know, somebody who knows nothing about that task. It could be you coming down to our farm, and with that simple visual way of explaining step by step, do this, do this, do this. To do this task, you need to have these things available before you start. We are seeing that helps bridge a little bit that competency gap, and then starting to track who's been exposed to what, and starting to create like a learning management system of sorts over time. To say that, okay, you know, these are easy crops to grow, these are more complicated crops to grow, these are easy equipment to use, and you know, we can create tiers for the workforce around that complexity, and that's something that we're working on. And making very simple videos to get them to understand those things is one of the ways that we are trying to approach this. And then technology, I think, is a huge enabler in terms of getting people to understand and visualize what happens when they don't do it the right way. And I think that's what we found is a very key enabler. You know, when you talk about storage, if you store it a certain way, if you harvest okra and you store it a certain way overnight, getting them to visualize what's going to happen if it is not done right is a very simple way to actually change this. And the beauty of technology is that once that content is created, you just need the conduits to transmit it to whoever need be, who needs to access it, and we can make it happen very quickly. So that's one way that we are approaching it. I don't think we have all the answers yet, but that's one key way, simplifying it and making it easy to transmit.
Thank you for that, Sikander. Just one quick second question, and then we'll go to Allister for his presentation. You said that your market is really the upper middle class across India, which is like 400 million people or something like that, yeah. And they are comfortable, in their homes. They can afford to buy a car and all the other luxuries and so on. And you said they are still very price sensitive. Is there a role for marketing, food marketing of organic foods, and is that being done well in India?
So it's started, in the past we had very select brands which were working on it, like Organic India is one of the earliest ones that came about, and then 24 Mantra. And there was not much marketing. It was just that they were the only organic certified items on the shelf. And for a long time, that was the only play available. And so they grew over time. And now they are becoming very good brands which have very strong supply chains, networks to procure the right kind of stuff, and customers trust them. But what we've started to see is more now is a lot of social media led marketing. A lot of stories, a lot of visuals, a lot of comparisons between things, and I think that's starting to change. While it is being done by brands to promote themselves, I think it is helping create the awareness in general. However, in India, because of the regulatory complexity, it's such a complex country to do anything, even getting that regulatory framework implemented. And I have nothing against the authorities which are doing it. Their task is unimaginable if you really think about it, with the spread of India and the complexity of India to be able to do that. I think the ultimate hockey stick moment in startup lingo will come when we are able to actually on the production side remove the price parity. If we're able to bring the cost of production down to comparable levels so that a business doesn't need a premium to survive in that space, that's when I think we'll see a very mass scale adoption, because then there is no difference between a regular produce and an organic produce. And so there is no challenge in a customer adoption, because the worst case scenario is you are selling them the same thing, but they are buying at the same price. And if you have the other information to back up your story, then I think that opens up the entire market much better than any other way of doing it. And that's what we are focused on as well. How can we bring the cost of production down using lean methodologies, using better planning and other things.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Sikander, and we'll come back to you, I'm sure, with some more questions. We'll turn to Allister Hill now. As I introduced him earlier, at RMIT University, part of the End Food Waste CRC. Allister, we've heard that, a huge amount of food is wasted, both upstream and downstream. We hear in developing countries, upstream, 30 to 40% of the food is wasted because of all sorts of issues. And similarly, 40% food is wasted downstream in countries such as Australia. What have you learned about the work that you're doing, and what can you share with us? Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Emric. Can everyone hear me okay? We've come through.
Yes, we can.
Screen. Great. So I'm here to kind of overview End Food Waste Australia, which End Food Waste CRC is a pillar of. I'm just going to give an overview of the steps we're taking nationally and practically to halve food waste by 2030. So. Okay, so thinking of the global scale, if we ended food waste, we could reduce 8 to 10% of global CO2 emissions. We could provide, effectively 1 billion meals a day, because that's how much is going to waste every day across the whole food supply chain in the world. And effectively, you could potentially save $940 million. Sorry, $940 billion, which is, just astronomical amounts of money, because so much of what we produce ends up going into landfill or being wasted. So, because we're in Australia, looking more closely at what Australia has to offer and what's happening here, the estimated problem here is that about $36.5 billion worth of losses happen every year. And that's the equivalent to about 7.6 million tonnes of food. If you think about that in terms of, effectively 70% of that is edible, but if you think about it in terms of meals, that's about 29 million meals a day. And Australia has, as you may have heard, a food insecurity problem, and food charities tell us that about 1 out of every 5 Australians are regularly going hungry. So if we can make sure that a lot of that food is going to waste, we'll end up back with people who need it. That's what we're looking for. So just a bit of an overview of our kind of parent organisation, End Food Waste Australia, and then we'll get into the End Food Waste CRC, which is what I work more closely with. So we offer food waste solutions that kind of look at paddock to plate. So what's happening for us, we're only looking at when it's been harvested, not the growing part. So Sikander, that's obviously you're looking at the supply chain, but it's more that side is on farm. We're looking at, well, what's happening from the time we're ready to harvest to by the time it gets through that food supply chain, right up into what happens with consumers in the household. And our 4 pillars that we have are the End Food Waste Cooperative Research Centre, and we're the R&D and extension side, and we've been operating since 2018, and we're funded to go another 2.5 years to the middle of 2028. End Food Waste Australia's second pillar is our industry action pillar, and that's where we have the Food Pact and we have sector action plans. The Food Pact is working closely with mostly individual organisations to see what they're doing and how they can improve what they're doing within the supply chain. Some of that is as simple as getting people in departments to talk to each other that haven't done before. So a lot of that is, the walking the chain and identifying what the issues are. But they also release sector action plans. Those sector action plans are looking at those whole sectors. So what are those industries doing together, and where can we have impact across those industries? Interesting enough, we've had recent released what we call an institutions food service sector action plan, and that's identifying what's happening in both hospitals and aged care. And that's relevant because what we also want to do is influence our food system improvements through policy and partnerships. And, we've heard definitely, government departments are really interested in what things like our sector action plan for institutions are saying. So there's, we're having that flow-on effect both from, so the End Food Waste CRC supported the institutions' research. It was a collaboration with our industry sector to do the sector action plan. Now we can influence policy by having that. So it's a multi-armed process. And then last but not least, our other pillar is saving food in homes through what we call the Great Unwaste campaign. And that's our consumer behaviour change campaign. And that's how we're trying to influence what's happening home and, to a point, what's happening when people are eating out, but mostly what's happening at home. So this is how it's separated. So as you're saying at the start of we have probably less that's happening in primary because Australia has pretty efficient agricultural sectors and we have those infrastructures and we're not losing that much. A lot of that primary losses are particularly in horticulture where it is difficult to manage what we're picking, but we are trying to absolutely impact that. Particularly we have a hort sector action plan and a big hort project that's happening at the moment. But then we also will go all the way through to hospitality institutions, those food service areas. And Food Waste CRC goes a little bit further as we look at households as well when we go away from the industry action. So having a bit of a closer look at End Food Waste CRC, which is what I'm representing. So we're aiming to have an Australia without food waste. And what we're looking to do is to engage with industry and consumers to reduce food waste across the food supply chain to transform unavoidable food waste into innovative products. And that's the three key pillars of the CRC. One was about information and better understanding what's happening with industry and consumers. One is about reducing it as it gets through the supply chain, and one was about transforming it. So we're really trying to improve, profitability, get stuff to food rescue, and deliver those economic and social environmental benefits for Australia. This is a list of the brand logos for a number of our partners that have partnered with the CRC. I won't go into them in detail, but it is a large group of organisations that are supporting us, both government organisations and industry partners across the supply chain and across Australia. These are the core research participants of the CRC. Again, this includes government research organisations such as SARDI in South Australia and Chem Centre in West Australia, but also here in Victoria, RMIT in Swinburne, and then there's a number of Queensland organisations, Adelaide Uni and Curtin in Western Australia. So our strategy is tied to the food and drink material hierarchy. We want to operate in that green space. Prevention is our main aim. We'd rather you put so many efforts and there are so many implications from growing food and processing food that we'd rather that food that is produced gets into the mouths of human beings. But then if they can't, then we're looking to upcycle and process that food that may be wasted into something else. Further down there, it's to donate it to people. And then the last one that we're really interested in is getting into animal feed. Things like recycling and composting, and while they're really important for the thing, it's not a focus of us as an organisation, because we prioritise that top end where we're saying it's being produced for food, food's being produced for humans, and that includes, food that goes to animals that are fed to humans. We really want to make sure that, or fed to humans or produce human food, we really want to make sure that we're getting that food to stay within that food supply chain and be eaten by humans. So of the three core areas that we represent within the CRC, so this is Transform's project portfolio. I won't go through the details, but one of the portfolios clearly there to identify and prioritise valuable products from waste streams. Another key KPI is to identify technology gaps and process limitations in waste transformation. And then it's delivered toolkits for optimising technology for feedstock there. So, are we getting that feedstock that can be turned, like things like brewers spent grain is one of the projects that we look at. And then also we're trying to understand policy alternatives. Some of that may involve, are we allowed to keep it put it into the supply chain, such as with, larvae, etc. So it's making sure that we can have those policy levers, because you may have those food health and safety issues that come through as well when you're transforming what has previously lost food into something else, into something edible. So Engage is no longer operating because they've met their targets, but that was our area where we're educating the future industry professionals. So we have a number of students that are about half of them are finished now, and a few of them wrapping up their PhDs and studies in the next couple of years. We've disseminated industry and skills training throughout Australia, and we've developed household and business behaviour change instruments to really understand that. And this work, particularly the last one, has really fed into that behaviour change campaign, the Great Unwaste. So a lot of that information is based on really good R&D research done within the CRC. So Reduce, this is Simon and I's portfolio. So we've been set up to map resource flows and look at waste and root cause analysis. I've seen Governor's face here. One of those projects here was looking at consumer fridge behaviour and waste reduction when it came to red meat. Another one was review functions and consumer perceptions of packaging and processing, which will focus on some of those projects as I go through this. Another one is to investigate product-specific supply chains and identify opportunities. You'll see there we've got stuff with abalone's, prawns. We've also had stuff with bananas. We've had some really good insights about getting bananas through the supply chain in Australia and internationally. So that's having impact already for some of these projects. Because like I said, we started in 2018, so quite a few of our projects are already having that impact. And this is another way. The fourth one is investigating methods to increase food donation and measure its impact. The biggest one we've had from that is trying to get food tax incentives to encourage businesses to use tax incentives to do food donation. We got as far as getting that legislation tabled last year. It didn't make it past the Senate Select Committee, but it's definitely been thought about and talked about. And that's that policy kind of influence that we're having as an organisation. So stepping into some of the clear reduced projects, one of our big winners, and it's award-winning, and it was set up to look at what they call safe food packaging. So they developed both criteria about what works and a framework and guidelines and materials to distribute from that. And it's really like design guidelines for packaging professionals to be able to use these to, improve their safe food. So it's both, to make it usable, but also having an eye on food waste when you're designing packaging. We've trained thousands of dates in these guidelines, and it's been talked about across the world with FAO. There's international packaging awards that have been framed through these guidelines. So the packaging industry across the world is aware of the need to, plus getting behind safe food packaging guidelines across the industry. Another one that we did was the opportunities for packaging machinery sector to tackle food loss and waste. This was by their lead organisation, the industry organisation APPMA, and basically we looked at technology capacities for processing machinery. Like they're selling the machines itself. How can those machines and processing technologies influence stuff like sealability, stuff like carbon technology, AI, etc., robotics? How can that have an influence within the industry? And then we, as well as looking out at what's out there, we had some surveys and interviews with the sector to see what's happening and what their priorities are. What's upcoming, and the last project that kind of fits in that realm, is we're looking at having a food and beverage SME packaging and machinery solution centre. That's currently being contracted at the moment, and we've got APPMA back here and AIP back, but we've also managed to get Tetra Pak, which is a large packaging organisation, to come and support that project, and RMIT will lead the research. But we're trying to help SMEs because they don't have the resources of these big packaging companies and big companies to better understand how they can reach the packaging targets. It's obviously 2025. We've got there. Targets haven't been met, but we're still going to keep trying to get there with the packaging targets. And the packaging targets are looking at sustainability outcomes, but we want to make sure that as well as those broader sustainability outcomes, they're also not having an impact on food waste or can improve food waste outcomes, such as met through the safe food waste packaging guidelines and criteria. Okay, so we've also had a look at that household waste. There's some headline figures there. You've obviously, we can do these big figures as we're coming along, but obviously a lot of that food waste is coming from the home. A lot of it's going to landfill, but consumers want to reduce it. That's important. And some of the research that we've been doing shows how keen consumers are. Well, one, to say they're not really the problem, but they want to help work with it. But yeah, that's one of the contradictions of the research that we find. So consumer perceptions of packaging, we looked at what do consumers think about that wicked problem of packaging in reducing food loss and waste. Maddie said we don't actually have a lot of packaging, but then you looked in their fridges and they have a lot of packaging, much more than they were willing to admit. And so there is that wicked problem where people, do acknowledge that packaging is important. They don't want to really use it, but they are using it. So how do we find that balance? And that's what this project did. So yeah, there were significant insights in terms of how many people are concerned about it, that they do think packaging is a problem, et cetera, et cetera. If you get into the reports, you can see some of those headline numbers. But we did also look at, well, what will meet their needs to make packaging better for them in terms of reducing food waste. And, some of that is guidelines about how to use the food to not waste it. Where do you store it? How do you store it? What do you do with it? And that feeds into some of the future projects that we've had that I'll discuss next. And that's what we have. So we've had
Sorry, Allister, if you could please try and finish in about 2 minutes, that would be good.
Yeah, great. I have just a couple more slides to get through, and I'll go through. We have the National Date Labelling and Storage Device Project. That's had 4 phases so far in the first stage. Basically, we had a number of interviews with consumers, and that looked at various food categories. Those consumers told us that date labels are not straightforward. As you can see, there's too much information on pack already. It's really confusing. How do you find something about food waste in there in the first place? The packaging design is part of the problem. And the biggest thing here is best before and used by designations confuse consumers. I won't go into the details of what they are, but they definitely do. And they also need better storage advice. This has really resonated across Australia. We've had huge media impact from first the consumer interviews. And then once we designed the concepts and then had them tested through collective intelligence, we had even further resonation with Australian people are really interested in date labelling and reducing food waste through this way. So it's been a really influential project. And we are doing a second phase. This is to really test the actual design concepts using things like eye tracking, focus groups, and then advising the people at B what we can do to change things in Australia. And then just quickly touching on before I wrap up, we've got the household campaign, and that's really trying to reduce things within the household and those kind of costs within the household. This is the campaign. You may have seen it. We had a bit of a soft launch in WA for it last week. It's been around for about a year, but we've been launching in different regions, and WA had a big uptake of it. And this is just a quick thing on the impact that we've had across there. We've been doing good with training and rescued food. We still really need to have some big impacts on the actual food waste itself and how that works in terms of other things. And that's me. So yeah, I was here to help step in for Simon and our other colleague in Reduced here at RMIT, is Renette Cavanaro. So over to you guys, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Allister. You might want to stop sharing your screen so we can.
Yep, I'll do that now.
See a few more of the speakers and participants. I mean, I think the common theme running through both of the presentations is, the need to use, all of the emerging technologies right along the supply chain, from growing to, logistics and warehousing and the whole supply chain, and on the consumer side. And the second thing, I think the need for behavior change, particularly with consumers here in Australia. Allister, you mentioned. The thing, what does your research show? What really sticks if we want to achieve positive behavioral change?
So for the behavioural change campaign, it's making it easy. It's so that the campaign's tried to break things into simple things like, well, just think about what you are making. Who are you cooking for? Do you want to just, maybe cook less? But if you do cook too much, you can store it and reuse it again. You're really getting down to those basics to get people to think a little bit. Take a list when you go out. All those things that just get people to check themselves a little bit to make sure that they're not either over purchasing, over provisioning when they're cooking, and then if they do have stuff left over, to then remember to store it and eat it later. So just those really simple things.
Yeah. Sikander, is food waste in the home a problem in India? I'm assuming no, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. And is it a problem in restaurants and other places where food is served?
So unfortunately, it's a behavior which is getting worse year on year. When we were growing up, it was never a problem. There was not a speck of food wasted. But as India develops and progresses, food waste is becoming a problem at the home side as well, because we are basically replicating the same systems which have led to food waste in the West and Australia, for example. And if we replicate the same systems, the outcomes will be the same. So it is becoming a problem more and more.
The other question I wanted to ask you, Sikander, is, as you improve your supply chains and growing food and so on, do you look overseas to places like Australia as an advanced economy to see what you could learn? And same question to Allister, food waste is what can we learn from developing countries with respect to food waste? So what do we learn from other ends of the supply chain?
I can start. I think the two things that we learn. One is that while now the trend is changing with technology being developed in India for India, a lot of technology has already been developed in the West, be it in the growing side, be it in the supply chain, cold storages and management down to the last consumer level. And there's a lot for us to learn there and see how those same solutions can be adapted into our context with more smallholder farmers, with more, you have to add that to one thing, but being able to adapt that is a very key area, and we are constantly looking out for it. Thankfully, Claude and ChatGPT make that job a little bit easier for us. When we ask them the questions, we get the answers back.
Yeah, so I think it's similar for us is, we can learn to take more when we harvest, to recognize the value of has been grown and to use more of that, rather than letting it go waste in the fields. And then there's the second one is to be more considerate of what we're using in the home, which, a lot of us have the convenience has taken over, and so we're not as conscious of what we're using, and even those cooking skills that have been lost, a lot in the West, but those that you do get in, developing regions where people still know how to cook and use everything they have. So that's a lot of those lessons that can be shared both, and even within Australia, lots of more recent migrants still have those skills, and it's important. More so than a number of people that have kind of raised here over a number of generations. Those skills are something we can learn about, better ways of storing and utilising what we purchase. So.
I'll just add one thing. I think one thing that we are seeing in the last couple of months and years in India, which is kind of bucking the trend, the global trends, has been that instead of getting on the superfood wagon and avocados spreading all over India and quinoa spreading all over India, there's a very interesting resurgence of going back to the roots and reviving the millets. And I think the government had a big role to play in that, but kind of bucking the trend that, just because something really worked in Mexico or in the US means the exact same thing needs to work in India as well. And I think that's one good thing that's happening, grow native, grow more, revive those things which have been doing well here. And I think that's another thing that can be quite interesting.
Any final words from both of you to end our session today? Keep up the good work. That's what I'll say. Wonderful job you're doing. Sikander in India, as I said earlier, we visited a couple of your farms. The innovations that you're putting in place. And Allister and your team, at RMIT, wonderful work you're doing, and keep spreading the good word,
Well, so there's always opportunities with us. We're kind of reconsolidating where we're at the moment in terms of our R&D funding. But in the next 6 months or so, we should have a better idea and maybe looking for some future projects. So if there is project ideas you have, you can always come to approach us or other members of those universities that we talked about and research groups that we talked about. So.
Yeah. One of our participants asked about using drones to gather data for food waste. Do you have your own drones or take help from others? I think that's a question addressed to you. I guess, Sikander, is that addressed to you?
We're using drones, but not for food waste. We're using drones for actually mapping
Okay, but
ground level information.
maybe Allister mentioned that.
No, that wasn't me.
Okay.
Not that
Well,
I can
anyway,
remember.
we have come to the end of our allotted time for discussion today on food and organics. Thank you both, Sikander and Allister, for being with us and sharing the work that you're doing. Wish you all the best with all of your future projects, and we look forward to meeting you again soon. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Elson. Yeah, few participants are still there, but how is it? All good?
Sorry, Manju, just a second.
Yep. Yeah, all clean.
I'll call you back, Himanshu. I'll call you
Yeah,
back.
yeah. I
This is
have
the
to
recording for
leave
the
now. I
webinar.
got the graduation day to come. So thank you very much for your support. It went very well.
Thank you.
Yep.
See you.
Yep.
Bye.
We'll talk. We'll catch up definitely.